Hello. Oh, does this work? Fantastic. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much that everybody's here. I am Kira, for anybody who doesn't know who I am. My name's Kira, and I run an Instagram page called the Mizrahi Story. And 4 years ago, when I started that page as a hobby, I could never have envisaged that I'd be doing an event like this, which is, I think, overbooked, I'll be honest. So I hope that everybody enjoyed the shuk, enjoyed the kuba, shashbesh, met people you haven't seen in 10 years, had a lovely time. And yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. So I think everybody in the room is very much aware of the need to preserve the stories of the Jews of the Middle East and North Africa and Central Asia. So I'm not going to lament on about why that is necessary. I think all of you are very much aware. So I'd rather use the time, which is of the essence at the moment, to get all my thank yous out of the way in Oscar fashion. So I'd like to thank JW3 and specifically Nitai Shenda for their incredible work in putting all of this together. Nitai, thank you for listening to me in every single thing that I asked you at ridiculous times in the evening, and putting all of this together. It's amazing. Thank you to you lovely human beings for being so open to share your stories, which I'm sure people will absolutely love hearing. Thank you to everybody who was part of the shuk, my parents, Emily, Yoel, Mohammed, the oud player, Mazal, who did the kubba, which I hope you all enjoyed, even though it was vegan. I'm sorry. Sacrilege for many of you. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. I wanted to, again, in Oscar-worthy fashion, thank you to my parents who, since I came into this world, have supported everything I've ever done, and who spent 6 hours folding the programs that you're all hopefully reading and holding, which I don't know if you are. Thank you to my auntie Lisa, who flew in all the way from Israel for this moment. Thank you. You don't need to clap every time. It's okay. You'll be exhausted. You can, Thank you to Yoel and his family, my boyfriend, for supporting me in everything I do. Thank you to my friends. Thank you to everybody who's here. Thank you to my family. Thank you to all of you for being here and everybody on Zoom around the world. I really appreciate it. I love how this has turned out. And I really want to get on with the interviews, and I'm sure you do as well. So, just a quick note, the programs that you have work as a bit of a guide. They just show you the order of things. If we have time for the Q&A at the end, we have time for the Q&A. If we don't have time, unfortunately, we won't have time. But what we will have time for is for you in the intermission to just quickly run out and buy anything that you weren't able to buy in the beginning, books-wise, postcards-wise. So nominate somebody from your family to go and run and get those things. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, this is comfy. So, hi everybody, thank you for being here. I think the best course of action would be for everybody to introduce themselves to the audience. Just make sure that everybody knows who you are, where you're from originally. So I think it would be really nice to start with Danny Dalal. I think it's on Danny, actually.
Hello. Yes, it is.
All right.
You want me to introduce myself? You're introducing me here yourself.
That's true. Your video was there.
That's not the video. The video was there with my family and my parents. My name is Danny Dalal. I was born in Baghdad. I left Baghdad at age 19. I went to Frankini School, which was a school which has had about 500 students. We were there almost from kindergarten. Used to be another school before that, until we left. There's so many of my friends here, from classmates and friends and things. Baghdad was a lovely place for a child to grow up in. At least it was for me and my family. We had a nice house. We had lovely surroundings, parties and things. There's nothing much to say except that it all changed overnight, but we all have to think of the nice times and the good times, and there was plenty of those.
Lovely. What neighborhood did you grow up in, Danny?
I grew up in Masbah, so far as I can remember. It was in South Baghdad, south of, in the Resafa side of the river. And it was an area which was near Karada. Karada was kind of up and coming. Baghdad was small then. I hear now it's huge and the areas have all changed. So, don't know. I grew up playing sheshbej, as you see it, with my brother. My cousins, most of the time we spent as a family, and my uncle also, both my uncles, like any family here, family was important. We were all together. So events later that transpired affected us tremendously.
Thank you so much, Danny. That's very interesting. So, Frederica, are you able to tell me a little bit about you and your background?
Yes. So I'm Frederica Soar. I was born and raised in Tunisia, and I left at the age of 18 as we were all leaving, all the Jews, young generation had to leave because we didn't have to leave, but we were leaving because of the lack of opportunities in Tunisia at the time, and the fact that if we were staying, we wouldn't marry out, basically. So we left. I come from a background where my parents were not religious, but their religion was the minhag, the traditions. And that we were doing Shabbat, dinner was very important. We were always gathering at our table. What I loved having, it was that we had Muslim and Christians at our table all the time, all the year through. Every Friday night, my mom was hosting. And likewise, I was always looking forward to the Ramadan dinners and Christmas. And our friends, non-Jewish friends, were making always sure that we have kosher food at the table, vegetarian or fish. I want to tell just a few words about my father because it's quite a unique situation. He went to study in Paris, he's a dentist, and he came back. While everyone in the 60s was starting after all the war to leave, he came back to be a dentist in Tunisia. And a few months later, his own parents had to leave Tunis because my grandfather had a shop, and it was at the time where the socialism arrived in Tunisia, and they were taking all the money, and he couldn't sustain and help and nourish his family, so he had to leave. But my father stayed, and he married, and here I am. My parents still live in Tunisia. I go and visit them every month, almost. I loved going there. I loved everything about Tunis. I love the smell of the jasmine. I love the tea. I love the light that is very different, like all the painters were going there just for the light. That's the beauty of it. Now, of course, other things, there was, like, my friends were Muslim, Christians, but mostly we never spoke about one thing, Israel. And for years, when I grew up there, we were never, like if we say, oh, we have a cousin in Canada, we never named Israel as it is. And I can make, yes, you recognize that. I can make today, very sadly, the parallel with our own children today and myself. I wouldn't say anymore, very sadly, in the tube out loud, Israel. So it's something, that over the years, it's happening again. I never felt racism. I want to say that in Tunisia, we had all the rights. We were allowed to be Jewish, to go to our synagogue. We had the same right since 1857, and we were citizens. We were never expelled. We never had to go. But with the collectivism, that is the socialism, the different wars between Israel and the Arabs, slowly, we were like, we had to leave. They had to leave because they felt some tension. But they never really killed the Jews, or they never hanged them, or they never said, you have to leave. We always have had, throughout all the governments, they always said, we don't like Israel, but the Jews are going to be protected. You'll always be protected. So we even had between 1982 and 1890, we had the PLO Arafat that was living in Tunis. We had an office, Israeli office, from 1996 to 2000, where we had Israeli delegation, several what you would call ambassadors. My mom hosted them for dinner with their Muslim friends. They were always very interested. What I can say as well about myself is that I love our Arabic music. I'm a belly dancer as well. And it's a way for me the transmission of my culture, the transmission of what I love. And that is what, as well, my father transmitted to me. Because when he was a young man, he had to watch all the Egyptian movies with my grandmother, and so I grew up with Farid El-Atrash and all that. And another point is that I grew up speaking French. I never spoke Arabic at home, and it's not the case of everyone in Tunisia, the Jews, I mean, because you have the Jews from Djerba, I will speak about them after, the Jews from La Goulette, from Sousse, they were speaking more Arabic. The Jews went to the French lycée. We had 2 French lycées, and we were granted French citizenship as Jews.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Frédérique. It's really interesting. I would love to now ask Lisette to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Lisette Eskenazi, born in Cairo in 1947. My mother was Benvenuta Taragano, born in Istanbul, Constantinople, and my father Sam Eskenazi, born in Izmir. But Egypt was where I was born and where I lived a blissful childhood. I was there till I was 9.5. I went to the lycée. We also spoke French at home. I spoke Arabic with my best friend next door. It was a very, very, very multicultural city, and especially where we lived, which was right by Abdeen Palace, and also near Grappiers and Café Riche. And I just remember the smells, even 70 years on. It's incredible how emotional I get, because really, I suppose as a child, you never think anything's going to change, and you take everything for granted. And, it's just being Jewish was just who I was, like having brown hair. Really wasn't of any consequence. My best friend was an Egyptian Muslim. My neighbors were Greeks. We lived in a building called the Sarpakis building, owned by Greeks. Big marble staircases, probably 5 floors, 4 apartments on each floor, big lift, a man at the lift who greeted us in the morning, a mango juice shop below, and walking to school and walking home, I would pass the people ironing the shirts, and just also the smell of jasmine, the smell of orange blossom, rose petals everywhere, rose petal jam. The foods, the opera house, going to Mena House as well, by the pyramids. So we spent 3 months of the year in Alexandria. We spent every weekend in, where did we spend every weekend? In, Port Said with the little tree houses. There were kind of little houses on stilts where we'd kind of have picnics. And the sunsets were unbelievable. My what else can I tell you? We spoke Ladino at home. And we spoke French.
Sorry,
and
Lisette, just for
Italian.
people to
Yes.
know, what is Ladino?
Oh, okay, so Ladino was a Spanish, Jewish Spanish, I guess. It's an old Spanish, which was spoken by the Jews who came from the Spanish Inquisition. So my mother's name was Benvenuta, which was welcome in Spanish, because she was the 7th child and the first girl. And yeah, and it was interesting. My maternal grandmother was Elisa Cassuto. She came from Italy, from Livorno. And, but my father's mother was a Gioia Sicurel. And Sicurel was a big name in Cairo because the store Sicurel was kind of like a little Fortnum and Mason. And my uncle would go traveling around the world buying things. And so, yeah, what do I remember as a child? I just going with my mother to the dressmaker, having a maid pick me up from school, having a maid do everything for me. I say that because that very quickly changed. and having sitting on the balcony, waiting for my father to come home and have his arak and his little tray prepared. What else can I think of? That's about it, really, for a first introduction. And just the fact that there were so many different languages. Our table was always filled with people from all over. We went to midnight mass on Christmas with our Catholic friends. One of my mother's best friends was Italian. Obviously she spoke perfect Italian from my grandmother. And then also, you know, the festivals with the Mani, they would come when we had Passover. That was a big joke in my family, Passover. I would always say, why are we praying to leave Egypt? We're still here. And my father would say, but the difference is we're here by choice this time and not as slaves. And we certainly weren't slaves. We were traditionally Jewish. We were not kosher. My father was convinced mortadella was kosher because it was veal. I found out very quickly it's not. Caviar was considered kosher in our home. But we went to synagogue every Friday night, and every Saturday we would go to the cinema where we would watch 4 films, and there'd be a man standing at the beginning of the place where we went in to see the films with these simit all up his arm. And my mother didn't want me to have them, but I would convince her that they were okay. And there was kashkaval, and there were little zachta that you could dip in. And that was it, mango. It was just a blissful, blissful childhood till 1956.
Thank you, Lisette. That was lovely. Thank you for sharing all your memories. Niran, would you please introduce yourself?
Okay, so my name is Niran Bassoon. I was born in Baghdad, Iraq. I left when I was 16. I lived in Israel for 15 years, and then I came to this country. I've been here nearly 38 years. I came only for 3 months, but I stayed for 38 years. My family, just to give you a background, my dad was a journalist. My mom was a secretary in our school in Frank-Aini. I know Danny from school. We were all, after there was a mass immigration of the Iraqi Jews in 1951, 51, 52. We stayed behind. Some around 10,000 to 12,000 people stayed behind. They did not leave Iraq. And slowly, slowly, by the time that we grew up, there were about 3,000, 5,000 people only. We went, nearly all of us, to the same school, so we know each other even if we are not in the same class. So we'd know a cousin, or we'd know, it was just like a community. Big family, exactly. So my dad refused to leave Iraq in the 50s because he felt Iraq is his country. Unfortunately, by 73, he had to leave because the majority of Jews left. Again, as you mentioned, we had no future anymore. Times became really tough after 67. And that's it, really. I don't want to dwell too much on things. I just wanted to pick up what you said about Canada. We used to say Switzerland, didn't we? So I would like to take the time more and concentrate on my life project, which is documenting the stories of the Jews of Iraq.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. So back to you, Danny. I just wanted to ask you, obviously you mentioned that things started to change in Iraq, which is obviously a very difficult time. And a lot of you here might recognize Danny from the documentary Remember Baghdad. Danny actually really opened up about his family story in that documentary, which I thought was fantastic. Obviously, your family story is quite harrowing. And I wondered if you would feel comfortable enough to describe to me the events that led up to you leaving Iraq, how you left Iraq, and anything to sort of that effect.
Okay, as I said at the beginning, life was wonderful for me growing up as a kid. I go to school, I loved it, and then we had our sports house, Malab we used to call it, which was for a 16-year-old sport, and that's it. We used to support the Iraqi team and all that. But all that literally changed in a day, one day, which is the day the 1967 war started. We were at school, and suddenly my mother came, "Come on, let's go home, let's run home." She came to pick us up. We knew there was something wrong happening, but not exactly. I remember even on our way home, we literally were stopped in the street because there was a convoy of arms and of soldiers going to the front. So literally seeing it in front of our eyes. But this was visual. Nothing changed immediately. But literally within days, people started getting arrested. One of my uncles got arrested. And we knew where they were at the time. You can visit them and all that. But progressively it got worse. People were kicked out of their homes, kicked out of their jobs. There was things that, for us at school, it didn't change that much. We can see each other. We're family. We're friends. But for our parents, now, later on as I grew up and I became a parent, must have been hell. How? To think about how to look after their children and how to keep them safe must have been very difficult. And then things suddenly changed for the worst when there was another revolution. There was several of those in Iraq. There was another revolution, and suddenly the Ba'ath regime came in. And as a political...
Sorry, Danny. The Ba'ath Party being Saddam Hussein.
The Ba'ath Party being Saddam Hussein, or yes... predominantly Saddam Hussein. He was in the background at the beginning, then he became the president. But as a policy, the Ba'ath regime was not liked by the general public. So as a policy, they wanted to attract support. So who was, from day one, my father was listening to the news. The news was, and the speeches were after the revolution saying, the word traitors, and my dad turned white. He said he knew exactly what that meant. It was Jews. So within days, people were this time arrested, but you don't see them anymore. They disappeared. And it was obvious that it was really seriously dangerous then. Again, it's a long story, but after 2 or 3 months of this, there was mock trials, and suddenly there was hanging in the street. When I think about it now, 50 years later, I can't remember any incident in the world where they hung 12, 14 people in the street, and there was parties everywhere. People were actually celebrating picnics. For me, it's unforgivable. This is politics, and for me personally, I had my uncle, whom I used to love as much as I had loved my dad, And one day, they just arrested him. He disappeared. We never saw him again. 6 months later, there was a small advert in a paper saying Mr. Isaac Dalal is going to be hung tomorrow morning at dawn because he's a spy. But that was it. It was like on page 5 or 6, a small advert. It's like you're selling like a little advert selling, I don't know, a tire in the 6th page. It was really a life-changing experience for me until now. I mean, I can't describe how we felt then. From that point on, there was nothing left in Iraq at all, zero. I mean, already it's been 2 years of very bad situation, but we needed to get out. There was nothing left. Unlike the lady was saying about Tunisia, you go there, I'm surprised, but it's still there. Egypt is still kind of maybe tolerant, I don't know. But there's no Jews in Egypt either. 5. Well, in Iraq, the last 5 died. So I don't think there's any individuals. So the concentration for about 2 years and the conversation at school is who left, how we're going to leave. And there's nothing. You don't think of study. You don't think of anything except how we're going to leave.
When you say how you're going to leave, was it illegal to leave?
Oh, absolutely. The passport had been taken away from us 8 years before, long before Saddam. And people were escaping through Basra, just crossing a river. But after Saddam came, it was a much more difficult situation because we tried the first time and we were arrested. I was put in prison with my parents. I say it's a prison. It was like a hall almost as big as that. There was 117 people in one room, up from a 6-month-old baby, down from a 6-month-old baby to a 96-year-old lady, all in one room. I can't describe this, except imagine there was only one toilet between all those people. And when that toilet went wrong, I mean, these things stay in your head. It was absolutely, absolutely awful for all the adults and the kids. Kids can take things, but adults, they're used to having nice homes, nice thing, to see all of this and to get their children to go through this. I can't imagine what they went through. So these were very difficult times. And life completely changed only after we left.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry for what happened to your uncle. That must have been genuinely horrendous. Would you be able to tell me about how you escaped Iraq?
Right, first time or second time? The first time we went by car, and the thing is with Iraq, Iraq is 2 countries until today. There's the Arab Iraq and there's the Kurdish Iraq. It's nominally one country, but there's an invisible border in between. So the actual border is between the Arabic Iraq and the Kurdish Iraq. The first time we were stopped at the border at a city called Erbil, which is the center of the Kurdish region now, and we were arrested and we were brought back to Iraq, to Baghdad by coach. I'm making a long story short because my father was interviewed. He was interrogated. I also was interrogated as a 16-year-old. I went past a room. I saw a friend of mine who was 14, and he was sat down there with 2 of his younger kids, younger brothers, maybe 10, 12 years old, and they were hitting him on the soles of his feet in front of his brother and sister. Things like this don't go, you don't forget.
So people were being tortured?
Yes, if you can torture a 14-year-old. I was 16, he was 14. But so that was the first time they brought us back to Baghdad. We came back in a coach. In the coach, they put one security guard in between every person so that we can't coordinate our stories or talk to each other. I remember the one thought that came to my head: the best thing that can ever happen right this minute is for this coach to turn over and we all die. That was really the best scenario that I can think of. Anyway, that was the first time we were put in jail, 17 days there, and then through pressure from outside, we came out. Second time around was different. Again, I can't imagine how my father took the chance again with us, now teenagers, 17, 18, you know, we're just vulnerable. But we went, there's a little story. We took the train first away from Baghdad to north to Erbil. That train was so slow. I'm not imagining. I looked out of the window because it's the Iraq is like you're going to the north, you're going up. I looked out the window. There was a donkey, and the donkey went past the train. I'll never forget that. I'm looking at this man with his donkey. He went past the train. Then we got off in Erbil, and we were met by somebody, and the rest was easier. Because once we crossed over, the man didn't speak to us at all, but he didn't say a word until we crossed the very last checkpoint, which was between Arab Iraq and Kurdish Iraq. He looked around to us. He says, "Now you're safe." And that's the first time he spoke to us. For about an hour, 2 hours before that, not a word from him. And we crossed over to Iran, and we went. Iran at the time was under the Shah. We had good relations with Israel, and my aunt lived there. My family, and we went to Tehran. We couldn't believe how they were living, and we can see it all coming. You know, that is Iraq in a few years, and literally that's what's happened.
Thank you for sharing that, Danny. So your uncle was unfortunately hanged. Then you had to escape Iraq through the help of a smuggler.
Correct.
And then you ended up going to Iran, and then you came to England, yeah?
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Frederic, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned earlier Djerba. Yeah. Do you mind if I give the audience a little bit of context about the next question I'll ask you? Because I wanted to ask you about the El Riba pilgrimage. For those of you who don't know, in the island of Djerba in Tunisia, there's still a Jewish community present, and they're all Arabic speakers. And they're one of the oldest communities in the world of Jews. They're actually descendants of Kohanim. And in Djerba is one of the oldest synagogues in the world called the El Riba. And every single year during the Jewish festival of Lag BaOmer, there's a pilgrimage to El Riba. And Jews, Muslims, Tunisians of all different backgrounds, Tunisian Jews from France, they all go there for this pilgrimage during Lag BaOmer, and it's usually an amazing, really fun, really interesting event. The last couple of years they haven't held it because there was a terrorist attack there a couple of years ago. I believe a couple of Muslim security guards were killed and 2 Jewish men were murdered, unfortunately. But I've always wanted to hear from somebody who's actually been to the El Riba. So would you be able to tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So firstly, I want to speak about the Jews from Djerba, like you mentioned. Whereas quite a lot of Jewish from Tunis were very traditionalist but less religious, in Djerba they were all very, very observant, very religious. They were keeping Shabbat, all like kosher. They were not mixing with Muslim the way we did, although we had our traditions and all that, but we were, mixing and sharing. There was cohabitation. They really respected them because they knew that they were there before the Muslims, and they say that actually there is a growth. I mean, I will speak about the context. So El Riba is the oldest synagogue in the world, and every year at Lag BaOmer, which is like 6 weeks, I think, after Pesach, the Jews from Tunisia and France and Israel and Libya. So I went there mostly every year, and my parents as well, and all my friends and Muslim friends were going there because it was a celebration time. We had big orchestra in what we call the courtyard, the ukala, and singing in Arabic. There was as well singing in Hebrew. I mean, it's surreal. We had journalists from all over the world coming to see, and they were like wars in Israel, and you guys are all together dancing and singing, not dancing because it's religious, but singing and together. And there is as well different things. So we pray, we light candles, and there is a little grot where there is, like, supposedly, the story is that it's a stone that came from the first destruction of the temple of Jerusalem. And these people came, the Hebrew, they came, and they brought this, they ended up in Jerba on this island, and they built this synagogue. And so every year, people put an egg, and you put the name of the person you want to wish the good thing for. So usually it's to get married, to have a baby, for recovery, for sick people, and you put the egg. And my best friend, Tunisian Muslim friend, couldn't have children, and she said to me, please put an egg for me and pray for me. And I brought her the candle I lit for her. In the same year, she had her baby, and until today, our kids are the same age, and she said, my son is a son of the Griba. So this is how they believed, the Muslim believed as well in the Griba. And it was protected, like they were even bringing like security from the army of, like from Tzahal, we had 1 year. Sadly, 2.5 years ago, there was this terror attack of this fake policeman that shoot, and he killed, I think, 4 policemen, 2 Jews, and my parents were there as well, but they managed to escape. I wasn't there that year, and a lot of friends stayed stuck in the synagogue for 1 hour, hearing the shooting. It's rather shocking, but it happened. And then the 7th of October happened. So for security reasons, they are not doing it anymore. There is another, actually, pilgrimage that happened again this year, and in smaller, but still people came from Paris, and some organizer brought like maybe 200-300 people from Paris and Israel, and a big rabbi from Israel came. I mean, it's crazy when you think the context of, and I'll speak about it after, that they came, it's called the pilgrimage of Rabbi Chai Tayeb. It's a very big rabbi, and he's buried in the cemetery of the Borgel. And so they go, they pray on his tomb, and they do big seuda, where they drink bucha, they cut boutargue, and the pistachio and everything. And apparently he loved to drink, so they pour bucha and they light candles. So this is another pilgrimage that we have in Tunisia. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Frederique. For those of you who don't know, bucha is a Tunisian alcohol made from figs. Yes, lovely. Lisette, sadly, you were expelled from Egypt in 1956, which is, I know, a very traumatic time period for you. Would you be able to, what did I write down to ask you, Lisette? Please, can you tell me about those events?
Yes, I guess, well, the first I knew that something was going on was the curfews. Suddenly in 1956, before the bombing of the Suez Canal, there was trouble. I mean, I was 9.5, but I knew I had to be home by dusk, and we had these great big doors that would be locked, and I think it's the first time I felt scared, because Amani and I had gone out to buy cacahuètes, little toffees, and just our usual, and came back, and the doors were almost closed, and my father and my mother were huddled around the radio, and they closed the curtains. And there was talk of the synagogues being bombed. There was talk of, I suppose, NASA, nationalization, but the real crux, the real bottom of my world fell out when 2 policemen knocked on the door and gave my mother 48 hours to leave the country with us, but not my father, because my father was born in the Ottoman Empire, so he was stateless. And he was considered a spy for being a Jew. So he was taken away, And my mother, my sister, my brother, and I were meant to go on a boat with the diplomats because for some strange reason, well, not really, but my great-grandfather was a ship chandler for the British Army, for the British ships, for the British Navy in Constantinople. And to keep him on board, and we have letters saying, what will we do with the Jew Taragano? And they said, well, we'll make him an honorary consul. So my great-great-grandfather was made an honorary consul. None of us spoke English. We didn't have any connection to England, but we had this British passport. Everyone with a British or French passport that was from the diplomatic corps or was considered had to leave within 48 hours, had to go to England, had to go on the special boat. We had one suitcase. We were allowed one watch, one coat, one suitcase. We rushed to Sicurel. My uncle decked us out with clothes he thought would be suitable for England. Vests, balaclavas. We got on this boat called Esperanza. But my most abiding memory is gripping my mother's hand, thousands of people going to the boat, thinking, if I let go, I'll be left behind, I'll be lost. Got on the boat, suddenly realized my father wasn't with me, our dog, Whiskey, my best friend, everything I'd known, everything that was home and who I was. And suddenly my mother, my sister, my brother became my family. I mean, became everything, my world, because everything else had gone. So we arrived in Venice, actually, and we had to get off. I was sick. I thought the rest of the world was on water. I didn't realize. Having come from Egypt, the first country I ever saw was, well, the first city was Venice. Anyhow, we went from Venice, met by the Red Cross in England and the station, and then we were taken to a prisoner of war camp in Kidderminster near Birmingham, which had been an old Italian prisoner of war camp. It was cold. It was November. It was literally November the 15th or something. And we arrived, my mother in her matching leather bag and shoes and a little case. And the first time I saw her cry, there were queues. There were people queuing for food in the canteen. And she said to me in French, "Non, non, non, les esquinazis ne se mettent pas en ligne. We don't stand in a queue." And people are laughing because they recognize that kind of expression. And I'm like, but I'm starving. I'll queue. I don't mind queuing. And anyhow, the next day, coaches came to take us to school. And I was blessed in a way not to be there to hear of the two men that hung themselves or hanged themselves the night before. The men were put in one barrack, the women in another. I was taken to school. My biggest fear was I spoke no English. I spoke 4 or 5 languages, but suddenly I felt really stupid. And I was petrified I wouldn't find the toilet. I had to try and find the French teacher. Those are kind of my memories. And then coming back to this terrible place and seeing people crying and realizing that more than anything, that, well, who was I? How could the country that had been my home suddenly give us all a piece of paper saying no right of return? No, it was just unfathomable to me. And within a week, and we weren't just Jews in this, I almost called it a concentration camp. No, in this camp, refugee camp, we were all kinds of people, but people from the wheat sow, women from wheat sow came and asked if there were any Jewish families. And they saw my mother with the three of us, and they put us with different families in Birmingham, which was the nearest Jewish community. And I'll always remember this family, the Lindensteins. And don't forget, I think we knew one Ashkenazi person in Egypt, but otherwise we were very, very much Sephardics. And the Lindensteins took us in, and they were Holocaust survivors. And it was the first time, really, that I was told about that story. But cut a long story short, they were so kind, and we spent Pesach with them. And it was a very different Pesach to the ones I'd had in Egypt. That was for sure. That's all I can say about that. I think at that age, I was young, but I hadn't yet formed my identity. My sister was 23. She knew who she was. My brother was 18. He was 19, finished his baccalaureate. It was hard for him. And yeah, I think that's what I remember.
Thank you, Lizette. And you never got to say goodbye to your friend Amani. She never knew what happened to you.
No. The maid, Fatma, I had a Sudanese nanny. She was crying. Everyone was crying. But we thought, I don't know why, I just thought it was kind of maybe just for a bit or for a trip. But they were all crying when we said goodbye. And no, I missed Amani more than anything. And my father, he came 6 months later.
We tried to find Amani, but we weren't successful,
We did.
sadly.
What was amazing was how many Egyptians took this story to heart.
Yeah.
Because... but
We put it on
talk
TikTok,
about-
and
yeah.
we tried to find Amani, and half of Egypt was looking for her. But
Yes,
unfortunately,
I
being called
know.
Amani in Egypt is like being called John Smith here, so
Yeah.
it wasn't very successful. But we still hold out hope, don't we? Niran, you have this incredible YouTube channel and an incredible TikTok, and everybody knows you and knows your face. Would you be able to tell me a little bit about your YouTube, why you started it, and all about that journey, please?
Okay, so first of all, my channel is called Nur Unar, which means fire and light and fire. If you're interested, then I can tell you the story behind this. So I started actually on one of the trips to Israel in 2017 to do a vlog, to do small videos, to put them on Facebook page called Jews of Iraq, that I was one of the admins, and it literally went viral about Jews in Israel. People wanted more and more videos. A few weeks after that, I received one of my videos from somebody from Iraq telling me, look, these are the Jews of Iraq in Israel. Look how beautiful this video is. And I thought to myself, why don't I use this to actually create a platform to put interviews of Jews of Iraq to tell their story. And hopefully, Danny, we've got a date. So I speak the Arabic dialect, I speak the Judeo-Arabic, and I speak the Baghdadi spoken dialect. And this way I can interview people specifically in Arabic to make it available for those who cannot speak any other language or don't understand any other language. And then they can engage. I can tell them the right narrative because till now, they're getting the information, the propaganda against the Jews told by non-Jews. So why not to tell our story by ourselves? So the channel has a clear and sincere, sorry, I had to write it down because Kira limited me, and if I don't have it written, I will just stray. So the channel has a clear and sincere purpose. It's to document and preserve and share the history and the tradition of the Jews of Iraq. For centuries, Jewish life was an integral part of Iraq. We spoke Arabic. We contributed to literature, poetry, music. We participated in trade and craftsmanship. and helped shape the social and cultural fabric of Iraq. But unfortunately, many in Iraq now do not know that. Much of this story is missing from the public memory. So my goal is not to idolize or beautify the past, but to understand it honestly, with its complexity, with its achievement, and with tragedies. It's about human stories that deserve to be remembered. I believe that forgetting history has a big consequence, and my generation are the last to be able to document it. My aim is simple, but vital: to document stories of those who were there and have a story to add to the tapestry of our heritage, tradition, history, and preserve our Judeo-Arabic, the Jewish dialect. To those who might be finding it strange why I do my interviews in Arabic, I would like just to use this platform and explain. As I said, many of Iraqis do not understand any other language apart from Arabic. Doing these interviews in Arabic, it's engaging them, and they understand what we're talking about instead of having it as subtitles. They see our emotions, they see that we laugh about the same thing and we cry about the same thing. They get engaged. So the channel is purely about the Jews of Iraq. I don't do anything about other Jewish community, and I apologize. And the reason is because I know enough about the Jews of Iraq. I don't know enough about other communities. And I don't want the interviews to be just a dry question and answer without being involved in the conversation. It takes many hours to produce one of these videos because I'm a one-man band channel. I do everything. I search for these people, I record, I interview, I edit and prepare it for YouTube. As Kira mentioned, I do parts of them or extra videos on Instagram and TikTok. So I can reach as many as possible people to listen to our story. Some of these interviews, sometimes people say, where do you find these people? I say, I've got antennas in my ear. Whenever I see something interesting, I will just go and search and get in touch with them. Here I would like to pause and say thank you to my son, Ben, who's sitting here, my technical advisor and big supporter. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to do all this. He helped me to set up a recording and editing studio in my garage. And he is always available for advice and support. So Ben, thank you very much, Habibi. So last night, I checked the analysis on the channel, and here are some very interesting information. Views past 2 million. Subscribers, nearly 20,000, which is not a bad number for a channel which is purely only for the Jews of Iraq. The majority of viewers are from Iraq, 49.9%. And then the US, Britain, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, UAE, other countries. And the highlight of this search was the age. The age was, the majority was 25 to 34. Now, these people obviously never, ever seen a Jew in their life, but they can see it through my channel. And I get a lot of comments. I know as a fact that some masters and PhD supervisors in Iraq, in the universities of Iraq, advise their students to get information about Iraqi Jews by watching these interviews. So the channel became a digital archive and a source of information. It's also a bridge between people who lost touch for over 50 years. And I probably can write a book about how many people found each other through these interviews. And recently, actually, Kira and I managed to reunite people.
Yeah, so we reunited. I got a message from a Muslim lady who lives in Chicago, but her whole family are from Iraq. And she sent me a message saying, we remember this Iraqi Jewish family. We have all of their names. We used to go to their house, everything like that. Do you have any leads as to where these people are? So I hired Detective Niran, and within 3 days, she had called the lady in Israel. Unfortunately, most of the family had passed away, but one of the daughters was still alive. We made contact between the Muslim family and the Jewish lady in Israel. The Muslim family in Chicago said, I don't care that they're in Israel, we just want to know that they're happy, which was really lovely. They had phone calls, even though there's a language barrier, because the lady who lives in Israel now can barely remember her Arabic, but they tried to speak in English and Arabic and Hebrew, and yeah, it was all because of you. She's probably watching now, that's true.
Yeah. So, do I have time? Okay, all right, okay. So I'll just read just a couple of comments that I translated it. It's usually in Arabic. I translated to English, so I've got like a few comments on the channel. My lady, the presenter of the program, you are an angel who revealed the hidden and concealed truth about the reality of the genuine Iraqi Jews and exposed how much the corruptors falsified the honest facts about the genuine Iraqi Jews, who are the most authentic. I'll just skip, I've got so many of them. I swear by God, you have completely changed everything for me. You are the pride of Iraq. We love you. Please continue. Lady Niran, you are an honor to us, and you have documented the entire history of Iraq, especially the Jews of Iraq, who were role models of the Iraqi people. I am sure many educated Iraqis share this with me. You have my highest greeting, respect. Sorry. Yeah. I'm just finishing. And appreciation. Thank you and gratitude to you. So I sincerely hope that soon these videos will have English subtitles. Thanks to a very dear and generous friend who's sitting here, and hopefully we will soon announce it. So in advance, thank you. They say that a tree cannot stand without roots. The roots of the Iraqi Jews are very deep, 2,600 years deep in the soil of Babylon. Our story isn't just a chapter in the history book. It's a living and breathing tapestry of music, flavors, and traditions. If we believe in preserving the truth, and that's for you, Danny, of our history and the beauty of our traditions, I invite you to follow my channel, and please, please introduce me to any person who is willing to tell their story in Arabic. Thank you.
Thank you, Niran. I hope that everybody follows Niran's page. You just type into YouTube NOORWNAR. So if you want to watch her videos, they're amazing, and hopefully you will have some subtitles soon, because it would be wonderful to actually be able to understand what you're talking to them about. So Danny, we don't have a huge amount of time, unfortunately, but there's something interesting that happened between you and I a couple of weeks ago, reuniting you with your long-lost friends in Baghdad, and I wondered if you could talk to me about that.
Yes, it's absolutely incredible. We chatted, and in one of my videos, there was a young boy, little kid. I was 14, he was 12. And I said, do you know this boy was a Muslim boy? He was our neighbor. Little did I know of it. What you went to do is, you actually somehow found him. Basically, all I gave her was a first name, but luckily my mother, who was 97, remembered the family name. Now, I just must add about relationship between Jews and Muslims. On the day of the '67 war, they were our neighbors, Muslim neighbors. His mother came over to our house and said to my parents, said, if there's any problem, if there's a pogrom again, like there was 20 years before that in the Farhud. If there was another problem, if there's anything, you just jump into our house from the roof, because the roofs were flat, and you will be in my protection, and no one will give you any harm at all. That was the kind of relationship people had, like individually with their neighbors, with their friends. We had Muslim friends in our schools, just friends, like everybody has neighbors and friends here. Now, the story here is, I don't know how you found him, through the family name, through a contact you had in Iraq, and suddenly 3 days later, I have his phone number in front of me. And I actually spoke to him, and I was flabbergasted. First of all, he couldn't speak much. He was so emotional. And the last thing he said, please give my love to Auntie Berta. Now, this is a 71 Iraqi Muslim man calling my mother Auntie Berta, which is what he called her at the age of 12. That really moved me, and it moved my mother. And thank you. And we all said, you said thank you to everybody. We never said thank you to you. We really...
Thanks, Danny.
I really appreciate everything you do, and particularly you're a different generation to us. That is, for me, is very, very important, because we as a generation didn't want to pass our, shall I say, sorrow to our children. And we'd like them to live and be brought up here. My daughter's here. We just wanted them to be free, not to be burdened with us. But to see somebody like in your generation sort of appreciating all this and starting it is very, very important. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it was lovely to reunite you with your friend. I spoke to his friend on the phone just to do like a little, make sure it was the right man. And he was so excited. It was like they were children again. It was amazing. Like I said, we don't have a huge amount of time, but I do want to make sure that I get to all of you. So Frédéric, just quickly, I know since knowing you, since the first time I interviewed you, when I first interviewed you, your view of Tunisia, which you won't mind me saying, was very rosy. And I remember even saying I felt like you had rose-tinted spectacles about Tunisia a little bit, because your parents still live there, you travel there frequently. But since October the 7th, I noticed a big shift in how you speak about Tunisia. And I just wondered if you could briefly just tell us a little bit about what's changed for you since that time.
Yes. On the 7th of October, having very, very, very close friends, Muslim in Tunisia, I was surprised to have really a very small minority of them that called me, because we suffered, even if we were not there. We all have family there. We could have been there at that time, and we are Jewish. But that, I didn't realize that it was only in my mind, that we should be looked after. And when I said to my friend, you didn't reach out, you didn't call, and they said, but as a Tunisian, why do you even care about Israel? And that was like, how can they not understand the concept? And, growing up, I couldn't say Canada. I couldn't say Israel. We were saying Canada. We couldn't speak about Israel. My parents, to that day, their best friend, it's almost like an unspoken agreement. We don't speak about Israel because we don't want to offend anyone, because we know that anyway we're going to disagree. But I decided I'm not going not to speak. And I explained that Israel, for us, is our safe refuge for every Jew in the world, that we all feel for Israel, because when we didn't have a place to look for or to go if something happened to us, we ended up in the gas chamber. So I explained that in a very clear way. And they said, oh, but you speak like this, you were never expelled from Tunisia. I said, but you never know. So for us, Israel is our country as well. We are Tunisian, and our heart is to Israel. Now, so that's the story about, now other things happen, but I will leave a member of my family speak about it. The August before the 7th of October, so many Jews came to Tunisia. We were partying, we were like 30 years ago, like really there was a lot of Jews that summer in Tunisia, and we were partying in the place of my cousin, but I don't want to say more, but it was amazing. It was like Jews, Muslim, partying like 30 years ago. Something happened, and it's something that happened on the 15th of October, so very soon after, and I don't want to speak about it because it's not my place, but it saddened me a lot. What I want to say as well, it's more funny. When I arrive at the airport in Tunis, Carthage, I hand up my Tunisian passport because they want that. And they say, "You're Tunisian?" Frédéric, yeah. "What is the name of your dad?" Jean-Pierre. "Your mom." Michel. "Your dad, your granddad, Maurice." You're Tunisian? So, I mean, the new generation even forgot that we existed. And I have to say very proudly, I'm Jewish. The same happened at the Tunisian consulate last month. The same exact questions to renew my passport. He was like, "But how? Maurice, Jean-Pierre, and you're Tunisian?" I said, "Yes, I'm Jewish." And then he got all like very happy actually about the fact that I was Jewish. And we represented 4% of the population in 1948. Today, 200 Jews in Tunis and 1,000 in Jerba. We still have kosher butcher, synagogues open, and in Jerba, 14 synagogues for 1,000 Jews, all opened and all working. I visited them, all of them. It's fascinating, and I recommend. It is fine to go to Tunisia. I do recommend to visit Jerba as well. And thank you, Chiara. It was like, I was so happy to meet you several years ago, and as well amazed by how young you were and the interest that you had for all the Jews from like Mizrahi and North Africa, and how much you knew, and how the patience that you have to respond to everyone in the most peaceful way. And I made all my Muslim friends to follow Chiara, and some of them are in love with her. She's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't pay anybody to say these lovely things about me, but if you want to say some, that's absolutely fine. So, as I've said 100 times, we don't have huge amounts of time, but you have a beautiful poem that you wrote. And I would really love for people to hear the poem and for you to explain what this poem means to you about leaving Egypt and your identity, if you don't mind. And also, actually, Lisette, I had another question for you, if you don't mind. I wanted to ask you if you'd been back to Egypt. I think it's on.
Is it on?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're fine. I wanted, number one, to ask you to please read out the poem, but the other question I had was, have you been back to Egypt, and what was it like?
Yes. Well, I've been back to Egypt 3 times. I went back when I was 42, which would have been in, I had to write this down, 1989. And it was interesting because I stayed at the Manor House. The manager knew my family name. I was with a group of people, but he upgraded me to the royal suite because he said they weren't coming. The young taxi drivers didn't know where we lived because all the names had been changed after Nasser. But the older taxi drivers knew exactly where we lived in Casranil, and he also knew the lycée, and he took me. And when I went into the lycée, there was a teacher there, one of the few Jews, who had married a Muslim and so hadn't left. But she knew my brother, who'd also been there. And she was teaching a child, and she said, "I'll take you to where you lived." And we went up to see where I lived. And what struck me was the building was the same. Nothing had been touched. Everything, all the wires were coming off. It was just untouched in 33 years. And the furniture was still my mother's furniture. The paper, the curtains, but the family were they wanted me to come back. It was during Ramadan. They said, please come in the evening so we can offer you food. The young little Egyptian girl with me was translating because I completely forgot my Arabic when we left Egypt. And they were sorry. They said that the whole country had gone down since all the Europeans had left, which it had. And they also felt, they kept saying, you know, the government gave us this home. We didn't take it. But so it was a very strange visit. But the people, I remembered them as sweet people. And I found them as sweet people. That first time I went back. The second time I went back was in 2008, and I went with my son, who was then 37 years old, to show him where I lived. Now, it was different. It was very different. People were praying more in the street. They had everybody was covered in black. It had become a little bit of a playground for Saudis, but how was it different as well? Nobody really remembered that there were Jews. The first time I went to the synagogue, which was being still taken care of by another Jewish man who'd stayed on, and I was able to light the oil lamps for my grandmothers. But the second time I went back, the synagogue was closed, we weren't allowed in, and everything had been stolen. And it was called the City of the Dead. I couldn't go to the cemeteries. People were living in what would have been the kind of graves that they had sort of houses, not houses, they were crypts with family names. So there would have been one for the Sicarals, an Eskenazi, but I couldn't go. And the last time I went back was with a group of Jews from Egypt, and that was just now in 2023. And that was interesting because they'd cleaned up the synagogues, they'd cleaned up the cemeteries, the beautiful synagogue in Alexandria had been open, and we had a guide who had a Dutch father or Dutch mother and an Egyptian father. But there was somebody on the bus with us, and she said she couldn't say everything. And there was a whole new city from downtown Cairo, which was all military, and the country was in shambles. Buildings built by people had just been left to rot and had just fallen down in the street. And the building was derelict, but I stood there and I read my poem. And this actually, my education was 2 masters, one in fine art and one in art psychotherapy. And for my art psychotherapy masters, I had to do a self-portrait in any art form, and I chose to write this poem to basically say who I was. And a lot of my work, both in art and in psychotherapy, was around identity. So once upon a time, there was a little girl whose whole world was shaken when she was 9. Like a caterpillar in a cocoon, she just got moved too soon to become a natural butterfly. To survive, she would need to adapt, to learn, to stay vigilant at all times, lest it should happen again. And it could, you know. So there she was, knowing only who she was by relation to another. At first, it was her mother, then it was her father, but he stayed behind. So then it was her brother and her sister. Her family was her territory, her family was who she was, because everything else had been taken from her. This little girl was a refugee, you see. This little girl was me. Thrown out, expelled, kicked out, some said, for being British. What was British? What was she? A comedy or a tragedy? What mistake of nature she must be? A hybrid for eternity. Best be good, best be wise, best be quick, best be nice. Spoke French, you see, looked olive, not quite white, you see. Looked foreign and exotic, but not English as she should be. So little by little, she tried to reform her identity, for obviously England was where she was meant to be, and anyway, they wouldn't take her back. Because she was British in 1956 in Egypt when Nasser said, "Out, out, you foreigners from my land. This is Egyptian territory. This is where I was born," said she. Is this a comedy or a tragedy? My mother and father were born in Turkey, so they too were foreigners to me in terms of language and territory. My children were born here, so an Egyptian became a mummy, but not in the British Museum, only in her identity. Confused yet, wait and see, you'll never be as confused as me. Everyone said, "You're very lucky." I left my best friend. "You're so very lucky to leave." I left my dog, Whiskey. "You're so very lucky to leave." I left my home. "You're so very lucky to leave." I left all that I had known. "You're so very lucky." I left my daddy. I had new clothes for Britain. I had a new language to learn. I had a new culture to learn. I had new foods to try, and I had to grow into me. Was this a comedy or a tragedy? And where in all this was any reality? Reinvent yourself was one philosophy. We were different, you know. We were special, not like the other refugees. We were from Harrods, and they were from Woolworths, was how it was explained to me. Anyway, this was Birmingham, 1956, Enoch Powell times. Go home, Packy, go home, Wog. Go back to your dirty land and live in a tent with a camel for company. You Jippo Arab, you. I'm not a Jippo, I'm not an Arab, I'm a Jew, but I'm in England because I'm British too. How can an identity be a passport, a piece of paper? How is it formed? It goes on, and I'll stop because it's another page. But basically, it kind of describes, I guess, not just for me, but anyone from my studies, anyone who is torn out of their land, of a place where they consider home and their foundation, and torn into another land with a different language, a different food, a different everything. And it leaves you. It left me as a hybrid, left me always feeling a foreigner until I found Israel. And there I feel at home.
Thank you, Lizette. That was a beautiful poem. Also, where you live in Israel most of the year, you actually try to live near to Jaffa because you like to hear the call to prayer.
Yes. You know, as soon as I saw South Tel Aviv and Jaffa, it felt like just the other side of home, the same sunsets, the same. I do. I like the fact that there's a mosque down the road. It frightens a lot of Israelis, but I find it familiar. I used to wake up hearing that and sleep hearing that. There's something familiar to me to go to the Shuka Carmel and hear Arabic and Hebrew and French and everything. It's home. And after the 7th of October, I too felt very differently. The guide from Egypt suddenly started posting things.
Thank you, Lizette. That was really interesting. I really appreciate that. Niran, just before we end off, you actually have, speaking of home, you have a piece of home with you. I remember when I was in your house, I saw this lovely display that you had. Would you be able to just tell us what you've brought, please?
So first of all, I have a museum in my house, as you know. I collect a lot of things. I get a lot of presents from Iraq. So I've got a room I call Iraq. This picture is actually the postcard here is the tomb of the prophet Ezekiel, which is in Baghdad, not in Baghdad, in Hilla, in Kafil, in Iraq. It's an old picture. Now, 2009, I had a friend who went to Iraq. He is a journalist who makes documentaries. And without me knowing, he went to the tomb and he got me some bricks. And at that day, my mom was still alive and she was staying with me. And when she saw these, he just said to her, you know, Auntie, this is from the tomb of Ezekiel. She just literally started shaking. And she turned into a little child and she said, this is where I used to go in the Shavuot, you know, the festival of Shavuot. We call it Ziyara. We go and visit the tombs of the prophets. She said, I used to be there. He showed her pictures. She was very, very emotional. And these pieces from the holy place, my mom refused to give it to me. And I argued with her. I said, it's for me. She said, no, that belongs to me. She took it. And unfortunately, when she passed away, that was my part of the inheritance. I really insisted that it will be mine. So it's sitting here and it's showing in my house.
Beautiful. Thank you, Niran. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to everybody. I don't know that we have a lot of time now for you to have a quick browse in the shuk, but you should have enough time to grab a drink or do whatever you'd like to do, and then we'll reconvene soon. I'm sure people will usher you in for the second generation panel, which should be great. So thank you so much for listening. Oh, business cards for Niran over here as well. it's fine. Guys, if we can be done by 1:45, then we'll be alright. I'm gonna be really. I'm not gonna lie. Emma's story is like first generation, so I'm gonna give Emma like a bit more. If that makes sense. She's from first generation.
I don't want to start.
Is that your mum? Do you want to do
I don't want to start like first person.
That's fine. Don't worry. Who was the first person? Emma, right? No. I think you were the first. Fine, you were going to be first, but I'll swap you around. Yeah, I'll do Daisy first, then Chaim. No, Daisy, then Emma, then Chaim, then Emma. Okay? Remember your introduction. I like introducing your background. Yeah? Introductions, introducing your background. For you, slightly different. You know okay, sorry, I'm a bit stressed. I love you all. Thank you.
Introduction is about me or my dad.
My heritage is they came from, she escaped from.
We need to start. We have 40 minutes.
40 minutes
Until,
color.
even 35 minutes until we
I've told them all at 1:45 we have to stop. Hard stop.
So it's 9:20.
Yeah, so 1:45 we can stop there.
We can do 10 also. 55 is okay. But
55.
at 10 I want to be here.
Perfect, we will be. Hello? Is this on? Oh, it's on. Hi, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed the intermission and got to buy a few things. So the first generation panelists, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody took something from everybody's stories. A lot of them were quite emotional, and I really enjoyed doing it. The second generation panelists are here now, second and third generation, and I thought that that would be something really interesting to show you the transition from those who came here as first generation and then their children and grandchildren. There is actually one lovely girl here, Emma, who is first generation, and that's a very interesting story within itself. So I would really love to do exactly the same and ask you all to introduce yourselves if you're all right with that. So I would like to start with Daisy.
Hi, my name is Daisy Aboudi. My grandparents are from Sudan, which is a slightly unusual one, I think. There was a small community of Jews in Sudan. There were some Jews before this, but the community started in kind of 1898. Sudan became a British colony, and with the British come railroads, and with railroads come economic opportunities, and with that come Jews. So that's how Jews came to Sudan. They came from all over the Middle East. They settled in Khartoum, which is the capital, through the railroad down from Egypt, Durman, which is a slightly smaller city next to Khartoum, and then Wad Medni, which is an even smaller city just a bit further down the Nile. They were there for about 70 years. Jews were never expelled from Sudan, but things were made very uncomfortable, I think is a common thread. And by 1967, the kind of last wave of Jews left. There were two brothers who stayed in Sudan, and they just left a few years ago when the civil war broke out. So they were the last two Jews in Sudan.
That was a really interesting story. Do you mind briefly telling that story about those two brothers?
They just stayed.
Yeah, but there was a story about...
They never married. Their family, their parents and some of their other brothers left. The parents stayed a bit longer than most of the other Jews because one son sadly died, and they couldn't leave his body there. So they stayed. Eventually they did leave, and these two brothers, they had jobs and they were happy and they just stayed. They left by accident 2 days before civil war broke out. They went on holiday, and one of them, well, one went 2 days before. The other one was actually on the plane when civil war broke out and landed, and his phone had blown up, and he didn't even realize what had happened, and they couldn't go back. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So I also wanted now to ask Chaim to introduce herself, if you don't mind.
Hi, my name's Chaim Louis. I am a fourth generation Yemenite Jew and third generation Iraqi Jew. My grandparents, both of them from my mum's side, came from Iraq, I believe in the Karada area. My grandfather was born in 1945 and left at 18 years old on his own. Before any problems, before the Ba'ath Party, he came to study, but obviously he could never go back after he finished his studies. My grandmother, on the other hand, she was younger. She was 12 at the time of the Ba'ath Party when they came to power, and her father noticed and realized that it's time to go for the Jews. So they had to figure out a plan to leave. But what was interesting with the Iraqis is that they hated the Jews. They gave them bad laws that they can't own businesses and everything like that. But at the end of the day, they didn't give them passports, so they couldn't leave. So it was very complicated. Like, you hate us, but you don't want us to go. It was a weird situation. So my great-grandfather, my grandmother's father, made a plan to split the family in half to escape. So that's a completely long, separate story, but they split the family in half. And thank God they both went to Iran. Both the halves of the family went to Iran. And then after Iran, they stayed there for a couple months and went to Israel. It's very different to my great-grandfather and great-grandmother's story from Yemen. On the other hand, the Israelis organized Operation Magic Carpet, I believe it was, in the early 50s. And they had to walk. They lived in Sana'a, which was a long walk away from the nearest airport, which was in Aden, and they walked all the way to Aden, and then literally with about 50,000 other Jews flew to Israel. Within about 4 years, most of the Jews were gone, and yeah, then there's me in Edgware.
Exotic. Brilliant. Thanks, Chaim. Brilliant. Okay. Can we please move on to Emma? Will you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Emma Sabag. I'm a Swedish Tunisian, and I grew up in Tunisia. My father, who is Fred's cousin, ended up moving with most of his generation to Paris to study, but at some point he decided to live the big American dream and get a visa. And in the 6 months he needed to apply for the visa in Tunisia, he accidentally opened a nightclub in his parents' back garden and stayed for 25 years. He ended up with a pork factory, an alcohol factory, and 11 nightclubs as a Jewish man in a Muslim country. And as Fred mentioned, there were only about 200 Jews left in Tunisia in today's day and age. So growing up, I was the only Jewish person at my school. I knew no one who was Jewish other than me and my cousins who would come visit from London. And as isolating as it was an incredible experience.
Beautiful. So just in case people didn't catch that, Frederic, who was on the first generation panel, and Emma are cousins. So I wanted to ask Emily also. Oh, sorry, actually, I had the follow-up question for you, which was, why did you end up leaving Tunisia?
Yes, I left to do my studies, but recently, about a year and a half ago, 3 years ago, my parents left and they moved to Dubai after October 7th because in 2004, the Jerusalem Post found it very interesting that my dad had the pork and the alcohol and the nightclubs. So they did an interview on him about how it was living as a Jewish man in a Muslim country. However, when the attacks happened, the article resurfaced and a huge boycott campaign happened against my dad. So a lot of attention was brought onto us. It ended up on the news, on the TV. It got to a point where I was getting about 200 to 300 death threats a day. And my parents, they shielded it from me. But, you know, once I got all the incoming messages, they were like, yeah, you know, we don't think that we're going to be able to go back to Tunisia. And I think the heartbreaking thing was that when I left, I didn't really know that I was leaving, and that everything I thought was Jewish and part of my identity, that I could bond with other Jewish people, was more Tunisian Jewish, and that I could only find that in my home country. So.
Wow. So the Times, was it Times of Israel or Jerusalem Post? They had written an article about your dad, and then that was subject to a boycott because October the 7th happened, and then there was paranoia around
that
who your
was.
dad
A Zionist, and that any money that you would spend at his nightclubs would go straight to Israel, which is very ironic because he married a non-Jewish woman and he moved to Dubai. He's traditionally Jewish, but not very religious whatsoever. And there was a lot of confusion because there was an Israeli music artist with the same name as my dad. So it all got muddled up together.
Well, I actually researched your dad, and I found Reddit threads from Tunisians saying, look at this man, he's a Zionist, he's a spy, these people shouldn't be in our country. So that was really something to see that that's still happening. The people that I interview talk about that happening 50 years ago. And it's very strange to see that it's still happening today, and it happened to you. So I'm very, very sorry that happened to you. I'd like to move on to ask Emily to introduce herself now.
Hey, I'm Emily. I have a mixed heritage. So my dad is Romanian Jewish, and my mom is Iraqi Jewish. She's from Baghdad. So she actually grew up with Niran and Danny, and as they said, they all went to the same school and they all know each other. So they're also like family to me. And she grew up there, and she left in 1969. This was after the Six-Day War and the hangings that was spoken about. So yeah, I guess second generation, immigrant. Yeah, that's my background.
Lovely. And your dad's a Romanian Jew, born and raised in Romania, which I also found quite interesting.
Yes.
That's fascinating. Amazing. So I would like to ask Daisy, so obviously your family history is very interesting. It's not a typical Jewish family background. So what sort of things do you do in your everyday life to preserve that history and heritage that you have?
So the community in Sudan was really small. It was about 200 families. And I still have a question of why did they feel so Sudanese when such a small community for such a small period of time? And one of the things I think is because they came from, like I said, they came from all over the Middle East, but that meant that they had to marry each other. You couldn't have, oh, I'm only going to marry an Iraqi, I'm only going to marry an Egyptian. There weren't enough. So the Iraqi Jews were marrying Egyptian Jews, were marrying Syrian Jews, were marrying Turkish Jews, and it created this one big melting pot. So at home, the food that we eat, which I thought just was Middle Eastern Jewish food, is actually from like everywhere. So we have like molokhia from Egypt, and kebab banga from like what we had now, the like beetroot kebab from like Iraq, and like that's just what I grew up having. Because of that, I started a project to document these recipes, and I started interviewing people from the community to get these recipes. This was back in 2015, before you could just go on Instagram and find all these recipes there. And I quickly realized that actually the stories were much more interesting than the recipes. So I started interviewing my family, their family, like their extended family, and eventually I started interviewing the entire, as much as the Jewish community of Sudan as I could. I went to America, Israel, Switzerland, kind of everywhere. And I ended up interviewing about 80 of the community, 80 members of the community, and on my phone, just oral histories, put it online, and it kind of blew up a little bit, especially over COVID. Like, there was a lot of press. I got the interviews translated into Arabic, so on my website, you can find all the interviews and all the information in Arabic as well. So that's kind of how I relate to it's kind of my mission for people to know that there were Jews in Sudan. They existed. Yeah.
And you garnered some attention in Sudan.
I did, yes. That was, so when Sudan, before the civil war, they had a civilian government, and they made an announcement that they wanted the Jews to come back to Sudan. And because of that, people started kind of Googling, were there Jews in Sudan? And I was the only thing, the only source available. People in Sudan. So that's why I got things translated into Arabic, because people were messaging me being like, I didn't know this existed. I didn't know. And quite sadly, during the Civil War, I get quite a lot of messages saying, can you help me escape Sudan? My grandparents or my great-great-grandparents might have been Jewish. Can I move to Israel? And I'm like, I can't help you. I'm really sorry. I have no influence. That's kind of, it's in Sudan still now.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I think maybe now not as much, but yeah.
If anybody wants to visit Daisy's website, it's called Tales of Jewish Sudan.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got a lot of resources on there. Chaim, you connect to your heritage. I was very impressed with you. I interviewed your grandmother, Gilda, who's here. Hi, Gilda. And her video went viral a few weeks ago, actually, where she talked about escaping Iraq through Shatt al-Arab and everything. A very interesting story. And she managed to smuggle out photographs and in her top, which was really, really interesting. But you were there during the interview, and I was so impressed by you, and I couldn't believe that how old are you? 16?
17 yesterday.
17 yesterday. Happy belated birthday. And I just found you so interesting because you're so interested in your family history at 17 years old. When I met you, you were 16, granted. And I just found it very, very interesting. So I'd really love to understand why you're so invested in your family history. And also, I see that you brought something. So I'd like for you to tell me what that is as well.
First of all, I think we've gotten, especially us as the younger generation, we have an obligation to be not obsessive, I don't know what the word is, but to know and to learn about what our ancestors went through and to carry through the traditions to our generation. And this is virtually the only thing that my grandma bought, and a couple pictures from Iraq. It's actually my great-grandmother's father's, if I know, right? And I think this cup, it represents the whole of the Jewish people in the Middle East, whereas they weren't so religious. But if you ask, I noticed how everyone here was saying how I remember the Shabbats. Everyone, the Friday night when they made Kiddush on this with Muslims together in their houses with Christians and everything. I think Friday night is the, we say in Hebrew, the ikka of being a Mizrahi Jew, and I think it's the most special thing I have, in my opinion. It's very cool, and I'm very happy. Thank you for my grandma to letting me bringing this to the event. So thank you, Mama.
Thanks, Gilda. That's amazing. So what does it mean to you to be a Mizrahi Jew then?
Well, it means everything. It's my appearance, it's the way I speak, it's the music I listen to, the food I eat, my friends, everything, literally. In my opinion, to be a Mizrahi Jew is such a privilege, and I feel bad when I see people who have such a rich heritage and they don't really care about it, or they don't even know anything. It's like, take advantage of this while our grandparents are still alive, and you can ask them questions about how life was in Egypt or in Iraq. It's a waste of an opportunity, and I really thank you for what you're doing on your page. You're doing exactly that, taking advantage of the opportunity.
I think you're very articulate for 17 yesterday.
Thank you.
Emily. Oh, sorry. No, Emma. Having fled Tunisia, basically, I know that you ended up visiting last month, was it? What was that like, and what's your relationship like with Tunisia now, seeing as I don't know whether this is correct, but your family has basically been told that they're traitors to Tunisia. So what is that like?
It's a very odd feeling to love a place that doesn't love you back. And I found myself feeling very hidden all of a sudden. And all the things that I didn't notice I did growing up started to come back. I never told people that I was Jewish because there was a threat of possibly being hurt or someone finding it offensive. And as well, because of the dictatorship, a lot of freedom of speech isn't allowed. So to get attention away from the dictator, they'll talk a lot about the Israel and Palestine problems. So Tunisia has become a very, very pro-Palestinian country. So I'll go back and I'll talk to my friends and I can see in their eyes that they just don't see me the same anymore. Even though, you know, I have nothing to do with it. They have nothing to do with it. I've known them for so many years. And my home just doesn't feel like my home.
I'm sorry. Emily, you have the most amazing Mizrahi events that I sometimes post on my page. They're, I think, every 3 months, are they? And they're incredible. So you connect with your heritage through these events. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about these events, why you started them, how often they are, and please plug your event. I hope everybody in this room comes. Tell me all about how you connect to your heritage through this event.
So I feel really lucky that I grew up with an Iraqi mom who grew up in Iraq. So I always had Arabic music around me and Arabic TV and culture. And I never found spaces growing up in London where I could feel openly Jewish and Middle Eastern. It always felt like I had to choose. Like if I went to a Jewish event, it was like, you know, a mostly Ashkenazi English crowd. And then if I wanted to go to something Middle Eastern and hear Arabic music, then, you know, I would go. I just wouldn't say anything about being Jewish. And then slowly growing up, it sounded like there were a lot of other young people who felt the same way as I did. And I started to notice that anything on the Jewish scene that was Mizrahi was either like something political or something religious or educational. And I just felt like I just want a space where people can just meet and have fun and dance, and it's open to everyone, so you don't need to, you know, explain where you are or how Mizrahi you are or what that means. You just can come and connect. So from the very first one, which was the beginning of 2023, I just started like a social event. I was DJing. It was like 30 people. I'm pretty sure I forced most of them to come. Kira's been a huge part in supporting that event since it was born and also promoting it. So the last one we had a few months ago, and it was almost 200 people. And I'm so happy to see it grow and see how many different types of young people, and actually all ages, come from all around the Middle East and North Africa, Jewish, even not Jewish. And it's really nice to see people come, meet each other. And then the best thing that I hear afterwards is like, wow, I felt so included, or it felt like a wedding, or I met so many new people. And for me, I think that's another big thing about being Mizrahi. It's this open arms culture that we're so good at doing. And it's really nice, you know, in a more social space with so many young people to see that branching out, I think.
Amazing. Your events are amazing. I suggest that everybody comes. There's no age limit. Oh, the event is called Mizraki, but it's spelled Mizzraqi. So like Iraqi, because you're half Iraqi. So it's a play on words. It's fun. It's great. So we don't have much time left, and I've run out of questions for you all. But what I'm going to do is I would really love for whoever feels comfortable to just speak a little bit to what it's like to be a Mizrahi Jew or Sephardi Jew, however you want to describe it, in a very heavily Ashkenazi society here in London. What is that like? Does anybody want to speak to that?
I went to Hasmo, which is a very, very Ashkenazi school. But at the end of the day, they are very accepting. They actually allowed me and my friends to start our own Yemenite prayer service there, which was very nice. It felt like family. Like also, because we're such a minority, it doesn't matter, like you said, if you're Yemenite, Iraqi, or this, or your mum's this. It doesn't matter. Everyone's together, and it gives sort of like a a vibe of belonging. So in my opinion, being in an Ashkenazi-dominated area like London, it actually brings us all closer together. So I think it's actually, you could look at it as a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really positive outlook. Daisy?
Can I just say that that is so nice? I'm older than you, and it's actually really encouraging and positive that that's your experience, and I'm really glad to hear that.
So am I. Do you have anything to add to that? Not now. Okay, so you need another 10, 15 minutes to get into that. No, fair enough. Honestly, thank you all for your input and for explaining your heritage and everything that you do to honor it. It's really fascinating. And I think that probably concludes. So thank you all very, very much. And thank you all for listening.